Hey Tony, it's Friday, and first off, to answer your question of the week, I think what I'm most looking forward to with Amp getting back is honestly fighting and seeing all my friends because it's been a long time since I saw all my friends and I miss them a lot. Like the last time I really saw all of them was December of 2019, and it's been far too long, and I want to give so many of them hugs and just spend time with people I miss. So I'm doing this video on Friday because it's been a long week. I didn't get home yesterday until about 7:45, and we had game at 8:30. So I didn't really have time to sit down, make a video, get it all uploaded, and I was also just exhausted. Still pretty exhausted today, but it's not going to stop me. So Tony, in a shocking change of fortunes, I'm going to do a real deep dive into a historical era and a modern era. The thing I do almost every video. So, what I want to talk about today is the Pax Romana and what people tend to call the Pax Americana. Now, I don't really like that term. I don't think it's accurate. Pax Romana, it was the Roman peace. And it was anything but peaceful. There were several civil wars. There were at least three emperors who died violent deaths, three of them who were actually assassinated, and at least four others who died really rough, violent deaths. So that's one thing I don't think it's accurate. There were civil wars. There was still a massive power on just outside their borders with the Parthian Empire, but historians tend to call it the Pax Romana or the Roman Golden Age. And that was from the time of Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, to Marcus Aurelius, the last of the five good emperors. And it's at that point Rome was at top of the world, and no military could stop them except for their own. But they never faced any real outer threats that caused any specific damage. They had their largest territorial gain of the imperial age, and everything like that. And it's kind of gone down in history as one of the first world golden ages for much of the world. Now, historians are obviously going to focus, especially Western historians are going to focus on Rome because it was the West, whereas like there were countless golden ages elsewhere, like in China there were and the Far East there were countless golden ages before the Roman Empire even became a thing. But it's still known as when Rome was at the top of the world. And ever since the Pax Romana, historians have always been looking back at this age was a golden age for this country. Like the Pax Britannica was when the sun never set on the British Empire. You had the Pax, the Ottoman Pax, which was the Ottoman Empire's golden age as well, which took place during Suleiman the Magnificent, was kind of known as that golden age. And it's come to known in modern history with America now as the Pax Americana. Now, the Pax Americana, people kind of aren't sure when it started or if it ended, if it's still going on. It's unclear. So I'm going to throw my own hat in the ring here and talk about what I consider the rise and the fall of the Pax Americana. So I trace the Pax Americana back a little bit further than most historians do. I think it's right post Civil War is really what I consider the beginning of the Pax Americana, or the early stages of it, when the country was no longer at war with itself. We expanded west and west and west. And then when you hit about the 1900s, America became an imperial power during the Spanish-American War and things such as that. They still played a large role in world policy, particularly during World War I. And that was like when America ended up joining in a European war. And this was when Europe was still really at the top of the world. And World War I really kind of changed a lot of that. But it also changed American foreign policy almost overnight from when the war ended to where it was just a few months later. Obviously, when the war ended, America was obviously a combatant in it, and they had a large part a large party in the treaty that ended the war. Now, obviously, one thing that Woodrow Wilson tried to do was make the League of Nations, but America was too isolationist at that point to do that. But they still, maintained their territories, and they still played a large role in society. Like even during the Depression, they still played a large role in global economics. But when World War II happened, was really when what most historians look at as the Pax Americana began. At least when World War II ended, that's when many historians call that the beginning of the Pax Americana. And you can even look at it throughout your culture, throughout our pop culture and things like that. You think of like an American golden age, I tend to think of the post-war world when America had the largest economy, when in the 50s you could get a house on one income, and I consider that, like, in my mind, a golden age of America. Now there were certainly countless issues. You look at the 60s, look at the 70s, look at all over the place. There were countless internal issues, but even then, America still played an outsized role in the world, and we still do that today. Now, some historians don't really think the post-war world was the Pax Americana because there was the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the two largest world powers at that point, who were in an arms race, and so people don't necessarily consider that the Pax Americana either, because there was a whole nother large country who we were concerned about, and that's true, and like I can kind of understand the points on that, but I don't necessarily agree. America was the West, and Russia was the East, and that Soviet Russia inspired the People's Republic of China, inspired a lot of other countries throughout the world, and America, inspired a lot of capitalistic ones. And we're seeing a lot of these reverbs today. So many historians consider that when the Pax Americana really started was when the Soviet Union fell and America was left alone at the top of the world. I don't agree with that, because even when we had this other massive power, that was not unusual during other like golden ages of other countries. And it's not something I believe that we've only been in the Pax Americana for 35, 40 years. And okay, Spaz. So, which brings us to kind of where we are now in in the modern world, postmodern world, depending on how you want to shake it. And this is when I personally think that the Pax Americana is starting to wane. I don't think America's in a golden age anymore. I just don't. Clearly, we saw that on January 6th. Clearly, we saw that through much of the Trump presidency. And even during the Great Recession, a lot more, and in the post 9/11 world, you saw a lot of cracks starting to form within American society, within American culture. And you also started to look how people stopped looking at America, like Americans stopped looking at America as good of a light, and world leaders stopped looking at Americans as good of a light. And I think, in part, my personal theory is the Pax Americana really started to wane when the Soviet Union fell, and really more so when 9/11 occurred. Because that was when, hello tripod, that was when, the modern world really started to get scary for people. And we saw it on January 6th, 20 years after 9/11, 19 and a half, you saw that many Americans, myself included, are like, oh God, is this the end of the American empire? And it's something I'm going to be really anxious to see as we go further. I think we're nearing the end of the Pax Americana. We're still going to be a world power, but I don't know if we're going to be the world power that we have been for the past 70 years. And that's certainly a concerning thought, but it's also an interesting time to live through. I mentioned on in this channel many times before that we're living through a time that entire history courses are going to be taught in the future. And that's kind of wild. So Tony, my question for you is, do you believe in the Pax Americana? Tony, I'll see you on Monday. Later, bro.